Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive. Today, we're going to take a look at some pretty heavy stuff that went down in Texas back on December 4th and 5th of 2023.
Yeah, a string of shootings in Austin, and then it kind of spilled over into Bexar County, too. Tragic stuff.
6 people lost their lives and 3 others were injured. And as always, huge thanks to our listeners who sent in all the reports on this. We've got articles from all over local Austin news like Fox 7, KXAN, and then bigger outlets like Reuters, NBC News, CNN, CBS, the New York Times, even a statement straight from the White House.
Wild, right? You've got the hyper-local coverage and then the national and international perspective all coming together to try and make sense of this.
Exactly, and that's what we're going to try and do today, right?
Yeah.
We'll walk through the timeline, look at the facts as they were reported, and see what the authorities had to say right off the bat. And all that without getting too lost in the weeds or, going on any political tangents. We're sticking to what the sources tell us.
Absolutely. Just the facts, presented as clearly as we can. So I guess we should start with the morning of December 5th, right around 10:40 a.m. Central Time. That's when the first shooting was reported.
Right near Northeast Early College High School, a school resource officer was shot.
And this wasn't just some random patrol. He was doing a routine security check, a pretty standard part of the job for a school resource officer. And then, all of a sudden, he's reporting that he's taking gunfire.
It's chilling to think about. He was the one responsible for security at multiple schools, supposed to be keeping everyone safe, and then he becomes the target.
Talk about being vulnerable, right?
Yeah.
You're there to protect, and then suddenly you're in the line of fire. And of course, as soon as the report came in, backup was dispatched immediately. Another resource officer arrived to help.
And naturally, the school went into immediate lockdown.
Right.
Gotta prioritize the safety of the students and staff.
Yeah, can't imagine the chaos and fear in that moment. And then, after the initial response, they did a controlled release of the students, making sure everyone got out safely while things were still so uncertain.
And tragically, the situation just kept escalating. Barely over an hour later, around 11:59 a.m., there was a double homicide near Shadywood Lane. This is where things got really bad.
Yeah, officers responded to that scene and found a man and a woman with obvious signs of trauma. Just awful. One of them died right there at the scene, and the other was taken to the hospital but didn't make it.
And the details that came out later from Fox 7 Austin about this incident are just horrifying. They reported that the suspect apparently shot a handyman who was just sitting in his car through the passenger side window, no less.
It's just senseless violence. And then, according to these reports, when a woman came out, maybe she heard the shot or saw what happened, the suspect chased her down and shot her too.
It's just a level of aggression and brutality that's hard to comprehend. Just think about that time frame, right? From the shooting of the resource officer to these 2 homicides, all within a couple of hours in Austin.
It really paints a picture of someone on a rampage, just causing chaos and destruction wherever they go. It makes you wonder what could possibly have driven someone to this point.
And it doesn't stop there. Later that afternoon, at approximately 4:57 p.m., there was another shooting, this time on West Slaughter Lane. A man riding his bicycle was shot.
Thankfully, from what we've read, his injuries weren't life-threatening. But it just goes to show that this wasn't over. This person was still out there, still a danger to anyone who crossed their path.
It's like a pattern of unpredictable attacks. It makes you realize how vulnerable we all are going about our daily lives. And then a little after 6:54 p.m., there was a call about a burglary in progress on Austral Loop. And this is where things took a turn for the even worse, right?
Absolutely. This wasn't just a property crime anymore. This was a direct confrontation with the police. Officers arrived at the scene, and one of them encountered the suspect in the backyard.
And then, boom, another exchange of gunfire. The suspect actually shot the officer, injuring him.
And the officer returned fire, but it seems he didn't hit the suspect. So close. But just think about how dangerous that moment was. For both of them, really. And you can't help but wonder, how did this even escalate to this point?
Yeah, it's a question we keep coming back to. And the suspect, even though he was injured, managed to get away. But when the officers searched the house that had been burglarized, they found something truly awful.
2 more bodies, both with fatal gunshot wounds. So now we're talking 4 deaths in Austin alone, all in one day. It's just mind-blowing.
And then comes this whole other layer to the story of the connection to Bexar County. This is where the San Antonio area comes into play.
Yeah, Bexar County Sheriff Javier Salazar reported finding 2 more bodies, this time in a home in his jurisdiction. He said they were wedged inside a very small room, which is just a disturbing image in itself. And he specifically said that the suspect in the Austin shootings had links to this home.
And the truly heartbreaking part is that those two victims in Bexar County are believed to be the suspect's own parents. It adds this whole other dimension of tragedy to the story.
It really does. It makes you think, was this the starting point? Did something happen there that triggered the rest of this violence? Did he target his own parents before heading to Austin?
It's a question that investigators were grappling with from the very beginning. So after that confrontation on Osterloop, the suspect took off in a stolen Acura and led the police on a high-speed chase.
Up to 90 miles an hour. Imagine that. Tearing through the city with no regard for anyone's safety. It's a miracle no one else was hurt during that chase.
Luckily, it ended around 7:45 p.m. when he crashed near FM 1826 and Mopac. That's when they finally caught him.
And when they searched him, they found a .45 caliber 1911 A1 pistol and a bunch of handgun magazines. It's pretty safe to assume that was the weapon used in the Austin shootings.
So then the focus shifted to the suspect, Shane Matthew James Jr., 34 years old, from San Antonio, charged with 4 counts of capital murder and held without bond.
And as more information came out, it painted a pretty disturbing picture. This wasn't his first run-in with the law. He was a U.S. Army veteran, but he'd been discharged. Back in January 2022, he was arrested for domestic violence.
But he was released on bail, and then, get this, in August of 2023, just a few months before all of this happened, the police were called because he was having a mental health episode.
It's almost unbelievable, right? They were at his door, but they didn't take him into custody. The report said they didn't want to risk a violent confrontation.
So he was just left to his own devices, and a few months later, this tragedy happened. It's enough to make you question the whole system, really.
It raises so many questions about how we handle mental health crises, how we assess risk, how we protect the public. It's a complex issue with no easy answers.
Absolutely. Now, for the final part of our deep dive, let's look at the initial reactions from some key political figures. As always, we're just presenting what they said, no endorsements or opinions from us.
Right, just laying it all out there. So after the shootings in Texas and another one in Las Vegas on the same day, President Biden released a statement. He called on Republicans to support a ban on assault weapons.
He also pushed for more action on gun control overall. And of course, offered his and the First Lady's prayers for the victims and their families.
Standard procedure after these kinds of events, offering condolences while also using the opportunity to push a political agenda. And then we have Governor Abbott's statement, which he posted on social media.
He called the shootings heinous and said that the suspect should never see the light of day. Pretty strong words.
Definitely. He also said he and his wife were praying for the people who were injured and thanked the law enforcement officers for catching the suspect.
Two very different figures, two very different responses, but both highlighting the gravity of the situation. It's a reminder that these events aren't just statistics. They're real lives lost, real families shattered.
And it sparks those debates that we see all the time in this country. Gun control, mental health, the role of law enforcement. These are tough conversations, but they're ones we need to keep having.
So, to recap, we've gone through a whirlwind of events here. From the initial discovery of the bodies in Bexar County, to the shooting spree in Austin, the police chase, the capture of the suspect, and all of it connected by this web of violence and tragedy.
And yet, the biggest question remains unanswered. What was the motive? What drove this man to commit such horrific acts? The investigations are ongoing, but it's unlikely we'll ever fully understand what went on in his mind.
And that's what we leave you with today, our listeners. Think about this rapid escalation of violence from one county to another. How do we make sense of such chaos? How do we respond to these kinds of tragedies in real time when every second counts? These are questions that deserve our attention, our reflection. Thank you for joining us for this incredibly difficult but important deep dive.